Our last story today comes from darkreading.com, and the title here is Employees Enter Sensitive Data into Gen AI Prompts Far Too Often.
It's almost like Gen AI is a theme of problems.
Well, I think it's the gift that is going to keep on giving to security people for quite some time. The story here is that a company who I'm sure has offerings that can help you mitigate your exposure to people entering stuff into LLMs
For a
improperly
very reasonable fee,
for,
I'm sure.
for an extremely reasonable fee. They did a study monitoring, which like this is so meta, and not the company meta, but the concept meta, that it kind of hurts my head. Like the whole point here is that employees are entering data into LLMs that contain sensitive information, and the concern is that people who aren't authorized to see that information might be able to see the information. And in order to complete this study, they had people having access to the information they say that they shouldn't have access to. Anyway, it's very tangled up in my mind. But anyway, they did analyze some percentage of chat inputs to a variety of different LLMs from OpenAI to Perplexity and many others. I don't know that DeepSeek was one of them. And what they found was a little bit alarming. One was that um, customer data was in 45% of the sensitive data that was shared. So almost 46%. And that is an obvious concern because typically you have confidentiality agreements with your customers. And as they point out in here, typically these LLMs, again, unless you're running the LLM yourself, or you have some kind of special agreement in place with a provider, the data that your employees are entering is probably being incorporated in some means into future iterations of the model. And there's a concern that perhaps security researchers might have access to the data that they're inputting, or that in the future some some enterprising actor might be able to reverse engineer, whether that's through like some kind of a jailbreak, or trick the LLM into exposing the data that it was trained on. Now, I don't know if that is, I can't think of an example where that has happened in the past, but it's perhaps not impossible to think that that could happen. The net point is
Or
that,
or
go
chat
ahead.
logs or whatever just get leaked, like we saw with DeepSeek.
Yes, good point. That's right.
Straight up just leaked.
That's right. So 47 or 46% is customer data. Employee data is 27%. And I think there's an insinuation that this is happening as a result of managers relying on AI to help facilitate decisions on things like pay increase, how to equitably, or maybe not even equitably, but how to distribute pay raises and bonuses and promotions and things like that. And in order to do that, you're often having to upload or enter fairly sensitive personal information about the employees that are in that population. And I think that,
Which is why
beyond, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I would say, which is why I've gone to every LLM out there and told it that anytime somebody asks about me, I should get the maximum raise. I'm training it.
It's a very enterprising. You should start a company. I bet there's some venture capital in
It's like search engine
this.
optimization, but LLM optimization.
Let's call it proactive reputation management.
That's brilliant.
There
I
we
mean,
go.
maybe we could finally get those rumors about those dead hookers in Vegas off your back
Probably never going away.
slowly.
Yeah. I mean, someday the sun will burn out.
The heat death of the universe is coming.
That's right. So, um, I think there's another issue that she'll run into, and it's not a broad issue that spans across all aspects, but relying on AI to help facilitate decisions, especially as it pertains to employees or to, you know, um, certain business processes. I'll use an example like whether to give a loan to a person or not is the subject of its own regulations. And so even if you ignore the data privacy aspect of this, there's also a potentially very large exposure that you're creating if you have managers who are relying on these AI tools to help make business decisions that haven't been thought through. I mean, I'm not saying that you should never do that. I'm saying that it has to be done in an overt way because you could very well have employees creating really horrific legal obligations for you that you're just wholly unaware of. And it's really not going to necessarily come and splash back on the manager who did it. That's going to be the fault of of the employer. Now, the employer obviously is probably going to kick that manager to the curb, but how much damage could be done in the process.
And I think the reality is this is happening all day, every day. People are playing with this stuff all the time.
Yes.
And it's going to continue. It's going to get much worse. In fact, I think you're going to see some sort of AI involved in almost every aspect of business within 5 years, in my opinion.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
The question is, how much do we cede decision making authority to these tools that, at least at the moment, are known to have wildly inaccurate responses at times in unpredictable and non-intuitive ways. I think a lot of us have this intuitive, at least who have been in IT for a long time, have an intuitive belief system about how systems operate, right? It's like talking about the matrix. It's a system of rules, and it has to operate by those rules, but you can learn where those rules are. The thing with AI that I think is interesting is they're not intuitive rules, and we don't fully understand the rules. And so I don't think we fully understand how they can subtly break or subtly give us bad information. And we're used to a very logical output from computers. And I think these have shown us that they can do things that are not readily understood by us as to why they're doing what they're doing. But I will go back to this horse has left the barn. This train has left the station. It is no turning back. You're not putting the toothpaste back in the tube. You're not unringing this bell. And I think we're along for the ride at this point. And any other analogy I can come up with for saying it's not going to stop.
No,
Nor,
it's for sure.
nor do I necessarily 100% think it should. I think there's still plenty of upside value, but there's certainly some downside. And I think we as an industry tend to focus only on the downside. And as we said in our last show, if you're not willing to play ball with a lot of businesses on this topic, they're going to find someone who will.
So we'll get into the upside in a second. The 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 next most common category was legal and finance information, which obviously can be sensitive things like mergers and acquisition information and that sort of thing. And then finally, security and security code, like 6.8 and 5.6%. And they do point out that this is, while it's the smallest segment of data, it's among the most sensitive, at least from a company's perspective, because, again, I think what we're seeing is that some security organizations are relying on LLMs to help make security decisions by inputting relatively sensitive information, perhaps like vulnerability scan results or pen test results or code scan results or even source code itself, and asking for guidance on what to do. And again, if you're not careful, this can create a problem. Now, like you said, this horse has left the barn, and companies, and they talk about this in the article here, that if companies don't use AI to their own potential detriment because their competitors at this point almost certainly are. And so right now we're in this mad race, and I know it's very frustrating for so many people in the industry to watch. We're in this mad race for organizations to figure out how to most effectively use AI in their business. And this isn't necessarily to say like that we should not do this. It's not even to say that you shouldn't, you shouldn't use AI to help make these security decisions. It's that you should do it in a way that is acknowledged and overt by the company. Like you should use AI tools that you have an agreement with, where you have some kind of commercial terms that that cover the data protection and confidentiality. And I think that the challenge is that we're in this kind of a wild west where certainly the AI companies are very motivated and eager to sign customer companies up to those kinds of terms, but this is moving, I think, a lot faster than what a lot of the end companies are necessarily comfortable with. And so you see, I think, far too often employees, and even IT and InfoSec employees, just using personal accounts, kind of unaware of the potential risks. And so I think we have to make sure that there's some awareness that if you are doing this, it needs to be done in a certain company sponsored or company approved way. But I think it's also super important that the company have a means, if this is going to be part of your strategy, that you have provided the means for employees to do this. Otherwise, you are unknowingly acknowledging that this is going to happen.
Yeah, I agree.
That's my
And
piece.
it's a complicated, yeah, it's a complicated area of governance that I think we're all still fumbling our way through.
Very much so. Very much so. And look, the usefulness or the utility of AI in companies is a hot topic right now. There's a lot of detractors, a lot of naysayers who are pretty skeptical of the utility. And I think I've seen some people say it best. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be useful. And I think that's certainly the case in a lot of use cases. I don't think it's the case in all use cases, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think that in 5 years' time, a lot of the crap that has been AI enabled or we're relying on AI will kind of fallen by the wayside, just like there are uses of cloud back in the late 2000s that we just don't do in cloud anymore because that we're past that part of the hype cycle. But the reality is, again, companies are trying to find their way. They're trying to figure out that competitive advantage. And I think the security people who are going to be most effective in the next couple coming years are going to be those that help their organizations navigate this most effectively, not just be like, stop, you can't do it, it's bad. It's going to be those that help find the way through the forest.
Yeah, 100% agreed. As uncomfortable as that may be, and as much as it goes against everything we think we believe in, I think it's your only realistic option, uh, while still being highly employable.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So anyhow, um, I personally, I think it's certainly in a rapidly evolving space. I think one of the challenges we have is that, kind of like the word cloud, it AI means a very broad set of things. It's not like one particular technology. The risks of using OpenAI's ChatGPT is different than the risks of using Perplexity or Claude or DeepSeek. Like they aren't one homogenous whole. They all have their own uniqueness, their own unique risks, their own things that they excel at. And even so, like the things that they're good at today or the way that their best use cases today may be vastly different in 6 months.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about this. Like, they asked, "Hey, do you think AI could help with this particular problem?" I said, "Well, that's a really difficult question to answer because AI is such a wide-ranging set of technologies, and how do you plan to use it? In what sense? In what way? And so it's almost becoming such a generic term, like you said, like cloud or computer. Can a computer help with this? I don't know. What do you want it to do? How are you going to do it? And that's kind of, I think, where we're at.
yeah. So again, for better or for worse, we're seeing a lot of I suspect a lot of uh, labor constraints as companies, try to force their focus on better leveraging AI to be more efficient, more cost effective, and more competitive. And I really think, especially now, the people who are going to be successful in this field and in the adjacent fields like IT are going to be those ones that embrace this and help find a way to responsibly manage it in and the risks, the associated risks in their organizations. Because I just don't think we're way past the point of saying no. Certainly, look, there's going to be companies out there who are super conservative and they're still, I guess, using green screens, right? There's I'm sure there's some companies out there that are like that, but the by and large, that's the exception, not the rule. Companies right now are trying to be very competitive in this market.
Yep, agreed. And yeah, nothing else to add. I concur.